All right, welcome back to the listener's commentary on the Gospel of John. In this recording, we're going to be looking at John chapter 4, verses 43 through 54. And we pick up with Jesus just having spent 2 days in the Samaritan village of Sychar. If you recall, Jesus had been in Jerusalem for Passover. He left Jerusalem and was ministering, and his disciples were baptizing somewhere in Judea. We're not told exactly where, but in the outlying country of Judea, they were baptizing and ministering there. At some point, Jesus decided it was time to leave there, head back into Galilee, but to go through Samaria. And while that's a bit unusual, it seems like it was divinely arranged because Jesus stops at the village well, meets this woman, engages her in conversation. She in turn invites tons of villagers out to meet Jesus. And so Jesus had spent a couple of days there, and now he's heading back into Galilee. And in the flow of John's gospel, we've had a miracle about wine, a feast in Jerusalem, a long dialogue with Nicodemus at night, and now back into Galilee for a second miracle, a second sign. So we pick up in John chapter 4, verse 43, where it says, "And after the 2 days," that's the 2 days in Sychar there in Samaria, "Jesus departed from there for Galilee." So he's heading the rest of the journey into Galilee. "For Jesus himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his own country." Interesting little statement. He's just spent these 2 days in Samaria, and he's had this warm welcome. Lots of people want to know about him, and he spent 2 days there. He's heading now into his own region, Galilee, and his own people, and we get this little note from John that Jesus had testified that, man, he doesn't really have any honor with his own people. That sets up what happens next, verse 45. "So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans received him only because they had seen all the things he did in Jerusalem at the feast, for they themselves also went to the feast." And this seems to explain what John means when he recounts Jesus' words saying a prophet has no honor in his own country. What John seems to take that as is the Galileans welcomed him all right, but they did so sort of only for what they could get out of him, only because they saw him as, a wonder worker, and hopefully he could maybe do a miracle for them. And so his own people welcomed him all right, but only because they saw the signs. And so for John, this means it was a less than honorable welcome. Or at least it wasn't as good of a welcome as the Samaritans gave him because they recognized him as the Messiah. "Therefore," verse 46, "he, Jesus, came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water into wine." That's the first sign, water into wine, that was recorded in John chapter 2. And again, as we noted there, Cana is not mentioned in the other Gospels, but it's mentioned twice here in the Gospel of John, and then again at the end of the Gospel. And so it seems like there's at least some connection with the village of Cana early on in Jesus' ministry. So while Jesus is there in Cana of Galilee, here's what happens. There was a royal official whose son was sick at Capernaum. A royal official refers to somebody who's not a king themselves, but they're some sort of court official. They're part of, in our language, maybe a ruler's cabinet. So not a king himself, but he still is a person of status and standing. And he serves some king or some ruler. We don't know exactly which king or ruler, but maybe it's even Herod Antipas, who's the ruler of Galilee at the time. And he comes from Capernaum to Cana. And Capernaum is about 15 to 20 miles northeast of Cana, right on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. It's actually, we know from the other Gospels, Jesus' headquarters for his ministry. At least it's going to become that at some point. Maybe it hasn't become that fully yet in John's Gospel, but we know that's where he's going to kind of make his base of operations out of, and it's an important center. It has trade roads coming from various directions. It has lots of different cultural peoples there, and so it's an important center, and this royal official comes from Capernaum with a request for Jesus. Verse 47. "When he heard that Jesus had come from Judea into Galilee, he went to him and began asking him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death." So this royal official comes to Jesus, makes the 15 to 20 mile trek up to Jesus in Cana, and is begging him to heal his son. He's heard that he can do miracles. He's heard the stories. Maybe Jesus in Capernaum has already done some stuff, right? And so he wants a miracle from Jesus for the sake of his son, because his son literally is on the verge of death. He's at the point of death. Jesus responds initially to this request this way in verse 48. Then Jesus said to him, "Unless you people see signs and wonders, you simply will not believe." And we need to make sure we notice that it's unless you, that is you plural, hence you all or you people. Unless you people see signs and wonders, you all won't believe. That's important to notice that even though he's responding to the man's request, he's speaking about you all the people. John has already noted for us that they're interested in Jesus because of the signs. That seems to be part of the problem here. And so Jesus responds to him that way, and the critique seems to be that the nature of their faith is deficient. Their faith is based on signs rather than based on Jesus and his identity. In fact, even in the purpose statement to John's gospel in John chapter 21, we hear that signs are useful, but they're only useful as pointers to Jesus. Faith must be in Jesus himself, not in the signs. So Jesus responds with a critique of his own people, the Galileans' belief system, its deficient kind of faith. Well, the royal official responds to Jesus like this. He said, "Sir, come down before my child dies." He's a dad. He has all the compassion and feelings of a father. And so he simply urges Jesus, "Look, I get there may be a problem with people's faith, but just come and help my son." And Jesus responds like this, verse 50. Jesus said to him, "Go, your son lives. Your son is alive." Like, Jesus doesn't go with him, doesn't feel the need to go with him. Jesus simply speaks this word, "Go, your son lives." And how did the man respond? Well, look at the second half of verse 50. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way, went home. So Jesus simply makes this pronouncement, "Go, your son is alive," and the man believed it. The man believed that Jesus had enough authority to do a long-distance healing. The man believed that Jesus had enough power and clout in the spiritual realm that even from 15 to 20 miles away, he could simply speak a word and somehow it would be done. He believed it, and he went on his way. And then here's how the rest of the story unfolds, verse 51. As he was going down, that is, the man was leaving Cana on his way back down to Capernaum, his slaves met him saying, "Your son's alive." So they meet him and give him the good news. They've left the house. Some of the servants have come to find him and let him know, guess what? He's alive. Well, when he meets his servants, they tell him his son is alive, verse 52. So he inquired of them the hour when he began to get better. What time was it when he got better? What time was it when all of a sudden everything cleared up? And then they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." They're actually able to give him a specific time. And so the man is now on his way home. The day after Jesus pronounced that his son would be well, they give him a specific time. And this serves for this man as confirmation about Jesus. So look how he responds in verse 53. So the father knew that it was at that hour in which Jesus said to him, "Your son is alive," and he himself believed, and his entire household. He knew that that's the exact time that Jesus said, "Your son lives." And so he believes in Jesus, he and his whole household, his whole family. And then John gives us a little wrap up to the scene in verse 54. This is again the second sign that Jesus performed when he had come from Judea into Galilee. So notice that John is kind of numbering off the first couple of signs. The first sign was when Jesus turned water to wine in Cana back in chapter 2. Now John notes for us that this is the second sign that Jesus performed, and he tells us he performed it when he had come from Judea into Galilee. So he's done this one back in his home territory in Galilee, and it's the second sign. After this, John doesn't continue to count off the signs for us. He expects we've got an idea going that now we're going to track the number of signs through the gospel. So we saw the first sign, here's the second sign, and then we can watch for the next one, which will be the third one. And then the one after that will be the fourth one. And we can begin to track and count the signs that Jesus does, that John records for us in his gospel. And as we do that, what John wants us to see is not how great the signs are, but how great Jesus is. And that's really, I think, the key lesson for us to take out of this little snapshot here. as we reflect on it, what we want to make sure we learn is that our faith is in Jesus, not in signs. Whether we see signs or not, whether we experience signs or not, our faith is in Jesus, not signs. Signs are like clues, or signs are like pointers, right? They tell us where something is at. They tell us how to get somewhere. They point to something beyond themselves. And the miracles that Jesus did, John calls them signs because John wants to make sure we know that they're intended to do that. They're to point not to themselves, they're to point to Jesus and to his identity and to his power. And it's in him that we believe. We don't believe merely because we've seen the signs. We believe in Jesus himself and his authority and his power. That's the kind of faith Jesus wants us to have. It's the kind of faith John wrote his whole gospel for us to have. We believe in Jesus. All right, thanks for tuning into this session of the Listener's Commentary on the New Testament. The Listener's Commentary is a listener-supported, crowd-funded Bible teaching ministry that is making an impact around the world, and it's doing so because of your faithful support. So thanks a ton for your generosity. And if you want to support this ministry, you can do so by going to listenerscommentary.com, listenerscommentary.com. You can click the Give button. It'll redirect you to a page, my page, at World Family Mission, where you can put in a dollar amount. And there are people who give $5 a month. Some will give $3 a month. Some will give $10 a month. Some will give $30 a month. Some will give $100 a month. So the amount is not so critical as in just the support itself. And so if you want to support it, easiest way to do it is to go there, put in a dollar amount, and either click the make this monthly or give a one-time donation, and all those monies then will be redirected into this ministry to use so that more people can learn and live the Bible. Thanks a ton for your support.